Forgot about those 2 cards. So, this is going to be part 3 of the series. Like I said, the first 4 parts are interchangeable. You can watch them in any order you want. The 5th one is the one that I would say watch these 4 first on. So this is going to be covering the green cards of the game, what they do, if they're good, bad, or situational. The brief overview that I have explained before. Oh, I got Magician's Apprentice. That's nice. The overview that I've explained before on this is that generally there are 7 main decks that you're going to be building into. So your 7 main decks are going to be melee. Melee can be built multiple ways. You can build attack speed, you can build tank, doesn't matter. You're going to use the same core cards. Movement speed for like speed running type builds, which are more gimmicky, but they're just really good for running through maps if you're trying to, you know, either trophy hunt or if you're trying to just find ridden hives and clear hives. You have 2 gun builds, which gun builds are very important because essentially you have a double primary build or a single primary build, where you're going single primary with an unlimited ammo secondary versus a double primary, because your double primary is going to be much more generic, where you're kind of building around whatever the best weapon available is, whereas a single primary with a unlimited ammo secondary, you're particularly building into a specific type of primary. Then you have support, which is, support can be any one of the various support builds, but support cards are generally running the same thing. It's going to be revives, it's going to be team play, it's going to be healing items. The last 2 are kind of niche. One is the Pack Mule build, which is where you have a shit ton of items and ammo, and you're kind of just there to hoard all of the supplies for your team. And you also have the Copper build, which any character can play the Copper build, just based around giving you extra copper so that your team has extra resources in the safe room. You're able to purchase more things. So those are the 7 main builds you're going to be building around. Now, for the decks, we've covered the blue cards before. Now, the green cards, I'm kind of speeding up the intro and hoping you've seen the previous 2 videos, because the green cards take a little bit more time to explain. The reason why is blue cards are generally around stat bonuses, almost exclusively. There's very few cards that change how your build works. Red cards are primarily based around damage and support. There are some cards in here that change how you play, but if you're playing a support or a damage-based build, you're running mostly red cards. Your blue cards fill in for niche builds. Melee characters have a lot of blue cards. Speedrunners have a lot of blue cards. Certain cards are picked as niche picks for weapons. But green cards are all over the place. Green cards are where you get the absolute most flexibility in your build, is in the green cards. This is where you can specialize and get very niche picks. Because of this, a lot of green cards are going to be in that situational category, where they're very good in their build, but they're hard to justify in more generic builds, justify that card slot there. Whereas very good cards, or good cards, while they may be situational, where it's good in its build, you're always playing it in its build. And bad cards just simply aren't worth being run. So, starting off with the green cards, you have these cards right here, which are health cards. Now, the health cards, like other scalable stat bonuses, you have what I call the safety scale. This card is situational. It's 25 health, which is nice, but health is not that important because trauma damage racks up so quickly that 25 health disappears very quickly. So, it's a good card, but you have to manage, is it justifying taking up a card slot for that health? You have Hydration Pack. Now, this is a situational card as well, for the exact same reason. Because, is it worth justifying the slot? Now, the minus 15% ammo capacity isn't a negative if you're playing this into melee builds. So, melee characters, you might consider this good on, particularly because it's just better than vitamins. It's a better card to run. Non-melee characters won't run this card. This card's not worth it. But it's still situational for melee characters. It's not bad. Canned goods is just bad. Because it sucks. 45 health is nice. Now, if it was just straight 45 health, this would obviously be situational, but the problem is it's minus 25% stamina. That's minus 25% maximum stamina. Melee characters don't want it because, you know, they use stamina. Speedrun characters obviously don't want it, even though they could use it to tank hits. And gun-based characters, really just same thing as before, they don't care. The stamina loss isn't as bad as the ammo capacity for them, but still, you'd rather run vitamins because, sure, it's less health, but it's safer. So, where both of these are situational, canned goods are just terrible because nobody wants to run it. Looking at the only other really generic card we can explain kind of easily is body armor, which is just 20% trauma resistance. This is a good card in theory. The downside to it is trauma resist build kind of sucks in and of itself, because while you can resist a lot of trauma and keep your health pool bigger for longer, you lose damage, you lose team power, you lose a lot of the things that make the higher level builds pretty good. It's not a bad card to run, it's situational. It's just one of those cards that, do you really need the 20% trauma resistance, or is your goal, should your goal be killing shit faster so you don't take damage, or actually recovering the trauma? More importantly, Durable is the next card. Durable is a situational card. It would be a good card if it's hard to fit cards like this in your lineup. You have to be willing to weigh the value of the card slot over the benefit. This is one of the better situational cards to weigh. It's an extra 10 health. It's really minuscule. It's an extra 20% fire resistance, which is pretty much worthless. But it's 15% trauma resist. The 15% trauma resist and 10 health is good. Like, that combination is a good combination. It gives you a little bit of everything. You have the fire resist, which is meh, but you get health and trauma resist. It's a good card if you need some extra tank power. In fact, I would recommend Durable over Vitamins, just because this card gives you more. Yes, it's less overall health, but the trauma resist makes up for that, and it is superior than the health cards, even though it doesn't seem like it would be, because of the trauma resist. That being said, at the same time, health and trauma resist are not major things that require you to take up a slot. The next two cards are both good cards because they're kind of mandatory in melee build. Any melee build is going to be running these two cards because these two cards are just that good. You have Spiky Bits. This adds 15 melee damage to your weapon. This is very important. This is an extra 15 damage to the Knife Bash if you have the combat knife equipped, although on a melee build you're kind of not. And it also provides a flat 15 bonus to any melee weapon you have. Now, while I'm here in the shooting range, let's explain why that's important. Because it applies 15 melee damage to the value of each weapon ahead of time. The bat is now a 55 damage. The fire axe is now 110 damage. The machete is now... Oh god, why does it have to be an odd number? Fuck you, I don't want to do math this late at night. No, I'm doing math. It's 61 damage. And the machete is... the baby machete there, whatever the fuck this word is. The hatchet. The hatchet is now 95 damage. Yes, I know I suck right now, but I'm tired. But the main reason why that card is good is because that card applies that bonus ahead of time. It just automatically upgrades your melee. In addition to this, it's 20% damage resistance while using a melee weapon. What this means is while you have your melee weapon equipped in your hands, not actively swinging it, but equipped in your hands, you have 20% damage resistance. That is flat across the board damage resistance. That's friendly fire, that's acid, that's fire, that's melee damage, that's projectile damage, that's just general, I am now taking less damage. So this right here is a good card, you're running it no matter what. And again, minus 15% ammo capacity doesn't matter. Melee builds are all about big chungus weapon go swing. They don't care about guns. So again, the ammo capacity is a minor. This is just like a mandatory one. Alongside that is Mean Drunk. This is 40% melee damage. Now this affects melee damage after Spiky Bits. because it's percentage damage. So the 40% melee damage is on top of your benefits already. So if you're using a 110 damage Fire Axe as Charisse, and then you have Mean Drunk in play, now Mean Drunk is giving you a 40% damage bonus, so now you're getting an additional 42 damage on top of that. That puts you at 152 damage right there with just these two cards. So, yeah, Mean Drunk is good. In addition to that, your melee attacks now cleave through enemies in large, sweeping swings. This is mandatory for Hatchet and Fire Axe users, because the problem with those weapons is they hit overhead, meaning you're only hitting one enemy, and if it's slightly to the left or right, you're kind of fucked on that. So these cards are both mandatory cards for melee builds, and I hope I sold you on how important these two cards are for melee at higher difficulty. Next up is Soften Up. Soften Up is a situational card. It is a good card in a melee build. It's not going to be used outside of melee, but why it's in situational is even melee builds don't need to run this card to get value. You can for total domination of melee. This can make meleeing bosses and mutations much less threatening, but it's not really worth it most of the time. What it does is it makes it so that melee hits will reduce the damage of whatever you're hitting by 3% up to a maximum of 15%. So essentially, you swing 5 times and whatever you hit is dealing 15% damage. Here's the problem. You are not designing melee characters to need to hit something 5 times. If you're hitting something 5 times and it's not dead, you are hitting a hag or an ogre or a breaker. Nothing in the game should be surviving 5 melee hits if you've built properly. So this card kind of becomes redundant. This card essentially is, if you're trying to run a meme build where you literally run nothing but a melee weapon. If it's like, I'm running baseball bat only for a challenge video, then this card becomes useful. Outside of that, this card is kind of trashy. I hesitate to say it's trash because it does fit in a melee build. And on higher difficulties, tall boys can tank those hits. But usually on higher difficulties, your team should be focusing mutations first. So while you're up front wailing away on it, your team is ideally shooting it from the back. You shouldn't have to 1v1 a tall boy on no hope difficulty, but... Now, wooden armor is terrible. Wooden armor is kind of interesting, because it's 30% trauma resistance, which is very good. It gives you an effect that could justify, unlike the 20% trauma resist card, 30% is a significant enough breakpoint numbers-wise where you could justify slotting this into any build. There's one problem with this. It's 100% fire resistance reduction. Now, fire is not a very common attack type in the game. But friendly fire, literal friendly fire, can do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, especially on higher difficulties. Double fire resistance is a problem. If you are anywhere near fire or fiery explosions, you can die. Not to mention Shard Ridden, or this makes Shard Ridden virtually unplayable on your build, because those guys will swarm you, they're hitting you, and you're taking contact fire damage. The fire resistance is really what brings this card to trash level, even if you want trauma resistance. The next 3 cards are all in the terrible category. They're all trash for one reason. They all buff accessory damage. This is grenade type damage, essentially. Grenades, Molotovs, flashbangs, bait jar with the mutation card. If you have a quick slot or a support slot accessory that, you know, like gadget that you've replaced for the accessory, all 3 of these cards affect that. And all of the 3 of these cards are terrible. Because accessories do a lot of damage. Molotovs are very good at just crowd control for dealing with groups of ridden. Pipe bombs are very good at dealing with groups of ridden. Frag grenades are great single target damage. They're enough to kill most basic ridden in one grenade. And most big threats can't tank multiples of them. The squishier, like the hawkers and the stalkers, they can't take more than 1, maybe 2. The reekers and the bloaters and the pukers in them, they can't take more than 1 or 2. Tall boys and bosses can take multiple. But even that will soften them up. You would rather have extra accessories than accessory damage. Because extra accessories carries over from level to level. Damage isn't great, unless you're trying to go for the super grenade build, where it's like, I have 1 grenade, and it does 1,000 damage! I mean, yay, I guess. That's kind of a fun build you could run, but I guess you're only going to really run that on Hoffman for the extra grenade slot he has built in. But 25% accessory damage, that's not worth taking a card slot up. 50% accessory damage, that's still not worth taking a card slot up, even if there wasn't the penalty of ammo capacity, which Hoffman now no longer wants to run this card. And then you have improvised explosives, which is a 75% bonus, which still isn't enough to justify a slot without the 25% swap penalty that makes every character that's not a melee character not want to touch this. I mean, a melee character kind of doesn't care. If you're running melee only, I suppose you could do a super grenade build where it's like, I'm melee with a giant grenade. I mean, that could work. That's a fun build. I might actually try that. Melee, just straight melee with 1 giant grenade. But, yeah, it's not worth it. If I had 100% accessory damage, I could justify that. In 1 card, if it was 100% accessory damage, I could justify that. Anything else, I'm not justifying. Confident Killer. Alright, now, this is where we start to get into the uniqueness of the cards, where you can kind of diversify your builds a little bit more. Confident Killer is a great card. It's worth fighting for in some builds as a generic filler card. The way it works is that when you or anyone on your team kills a mutation, you personally get 1% damage until the end of the level, up to 15%. That is very easy to achieve. On Nightmare difficulty, you can easily get 30 to 40 mutations in a level. Easily. In Recruit difficulty, you're normally looking around 15 to 20, unless you're intentionally triggering hordes, or you're in horde-intensive levels. But that bonus can be achieved very early on in a level, because you don't have to be the one to kill the mutation. Your team can kill the mutations. You can literally be a support that does absolutely nothing for the first half of the level, and then once this is at 15, you just have a permanent 15% damage bonus. And it affects all damage as well. Gun, bow, melee, accessory. So it's a good card to run. The only real downside to the card is the fact that, you know, you're taking up a slot for a relatively minor damage bonus. 15% is not a great damage bonus. It's nice, but it's not great. If it affected the entire team, like everybody on the team got it, it would be mandatory in every build. Right now, it's just a really good card. It's not like I'm putting this in every build type. So Heavy Hitter is a situational card. This is obviously for melee builds, but similarly to the other melee card we talked about, it's kind of not worth it. What it does is it makes it so that melee hits will always stumble a ridden the first time they are hit. It only occurs once per target, but it's a guaranteed stumble. So it's basically an interruptibility. You basically knock them out of whatever attack they were doing. This is good for mutations, and that is it. Bosses are unaffected by this. I do want to mention that. You cannot stumble an ogre. You cannot stumble a hag. If you could, that would actually be kind of broken. But this is only good against melee mutations. And the next card that we are going to talk about is just simply better because of the bonuses it provides. However, It's not a bad card. The downside is you're going to annihilate Common Ridden in one swing anyways, to where this doesn't do anything for you. This is strictly if you are having difficulty meleeing mutations. But that's where my second card comes in. Ignore the pain. This is a good card. This is a mandatory build card for any melee build. It just gives you 20% melee damage against mutations, and it gives you an additional heal, because most melee builds you're gonna run healing off of melee kills. This is an additional 2 health per kill off of a mutation. Now, generally, you're gonna take more than 2 health and damage against a mutation, unless you are just absurdly one-shotting everything. However, remember our analogy before with the Fire Axe, where the Fire Axe with the other 2 cards with that 152 damage. This card applies after that because it specifically targets mutations. So now you're dealing an additional 60 damage. So now you're dealing 100. No, wait, my math is off. 212 damage a swing against mutations. Off of those 3 cards. 3 cards give you that absurd amount of damage. So, yeah, mandatory on melee. The next card's also mandatory on melee. This is Berserker. This card combined with Meth Head is essentially what enables you to never stop swinging. You just swing like a freaking crackhead. That's why the first card is called melee. But every melee kill will grant you 5% melee speed, melee damage, and movement speed for 4 seconds. This will stack. So this essentially allows you to just walk into a crowd of enemies and just swing, and you eventually get to the point where you are a machine gun, where you're like a sashimi chef, where you're just slicing through the entire crowd. The main reason you're running this, honestly, is the move speed. The damage doesn't matter. We've already talked about damage. You're already doing an absurd amount of damage off of 3 cards already. This card is not going to, like, say, oh, I need this card for damage. You're running this card for attack speed. You're running this card so you can just walk into a crowd and destroy everything in your path. Other than that, you're not running this outside of melee. So, True Grit. This is a terrible card. True Grit makes it so that when you take a single hit of 15 or more damage, you recover 10 health over 5 seconds. Meaning this gives you 2 health per second, which again, Common Ridden do 3 damage a hit on Recruit, so that already has made this card worthless and not worth talking about. But I want to single this card out for one reason. If you are taking a single hit for 15 or more damage on lower difficulties, that's hard to do. That's an Ogre, that's a Tall Boy, that's pretty much it. That's a Breaker. Nothing is going to do that much damage in a single hit. On higher difficulties, this is much more common. And on higher difficulties, this card is absolutely garbage. For the aforementioned, the duration heal is so stupid. In addition to that, if you are taking single hits of 15 or more damage multiple times, you're going to die. Remember that the lowest your health bar can go is 40 health, which means you can take exactly 2 hits and not die at that point. And this effect is not even going to restore your health all the way. It's going to let you get part of an extra hit. Because remember, you have to take 15 damage to get 10 health back. Over time. Not even instantly. So yeah, this card is trash. Then there's Pyro. In my opinion, Pyro is trash. Pyro does one thing. It increases fire damage. It increases all fire damage. This is double fire damage. This makes Molotovs and flamethrowers really good. Now this does work, by the way, with Phosphorus Tipped. So if you want to run an AR or an LMG build with Phosphorus Tipped, and where you're just mowing through a crowd and trying to get the fire damage off, this will stack with that. Here's one problem. Outside of Phosphorus Tips, you literally have like 2 ways to get fire damage. Molotovs, the flamethrower if you find one, so I'm not really counting that one. That's kind of a 2.5. We'll call that 2.5. And shooting gas cans. You can sense flammable objects nearby. That's nice. You can sense Molotovs and gas cans. Good job, I guess. And you get 3 temporary health for each kill with fire, which is gone in 3 seconds. So, yay. It's trash. It just doesn't do enough. Alright, then we have Bomb Squad. Bomb Squad is actually a situational card. It is not a terrible card, even though it benefits explosive damage. Now, why is Bomb card a situational card if all of these accessory cards are trash? Well, what it does is it guarantees an extra frag grenade spawn in the map. That does nothing. What it does do is it gives your team 25% explosive damage and 20% explosive resistance. The main reason you would run this is for the explosive resistance. Or if you're trying to do a law-only type build where you're running a law for ogres or something like that. If you find a law in a warp chest, or if you're replaying Act 6 a lot, this card gives you value on that. In that situation, the card can help. The explosive resistance is the main reason, because explosive damage is pretty significant. But at the end of the day, it's generally not worth that slot. Like I said, Super Grenade Hoffman can benefit from this, because he's going to have extra grenades. Next up is Well Fed. Well Fed is situational. I would love to run this card because it's just generically a good card. It's 10 extra health for the entire team. But it's never worth justifying a slot. I will always add this card in and say, maybe I'll run this card on a team-focused build. And it's one of the first cards that I pull out when I need to put another card in. As I'm scrolling through my cards, making builds, I put Well Fed in, and then when I have to, I was like, okay, I need to take out 3 cards to fit these 3 cards in. It's one of the first cards to go, because the benefit's just not strong enough there. It's a good card. If you can find room for it, it's a good card. Alright, so next up we have Heavy Attack. And Heavy Attack is redundantly stupid in my opinion. I think it's a trash card because I build my melee builds, as demonstrated before, for Big Chungus attack damage and Mad Lad attack speed. Heavy attacks are twice as slow, take up twice as much stamina, but deal twice damage. I have a problem with that. I don't care about your double damage because I'm already doing absurd melee damage without this card. I don't need this card to help me with that. So, it's redundant. I mean, sure, you could run this in a melee build if it's like, I want to 1v1 a boss for shits and giggles on Recruit. I mean, have at it. Outside of that scenario, you're not running it. Then we have Scar Tissue. Scar Tissue is a situational card. The benefit it gives you is pretty nice. It reduces all damage dealt to you by Ridden by 1. And it's 50% acid resistance, which is kind of a meh. The reason why this card is situational, it's like Well Fed. You can throw it in every build, but you're going to have a hard time justifying keeping it there. The 1 less damage from Ridden is nice because, you know, on lower difficulties, it makes common Ridden, like, meaningless to you. On higher difficulties, it's nice for shaving a little bit of the edge off. But again, hard time justifying it. Battle Lust is mandatory. Battle Lust is pretty much mandatory for any melee build. It's 1 health per kill, which is meaningless. Although that can stack with other abilities. But it heals trauma per kill. Now, the trauma healing is terrible. It's literally like 10... It's 0.1 trauma. It's not even 1 trauma. You have to get 10 kills to get 1 trauma point back. But, that can actually add up. Melee characters can walk through crowds of 20 to 30 Ridden, clear it in 5 seconds. Then you can get 2 to 3 trauma points back off of 1 crowd, easily. That's what makes this card good. Next up, we have Sunder. Sunder is a situational card. Sunder is pretty much only good on Charisse. You can throw it in any melee build, but I'm not going to recommend that. Melee hits will cause the target to take 3% increased damage up to a maximum of 15% bonus damage. Again, most things that you are hitting should not take 5 hits to kill. So that's kind of what holds this card back. The secondary effect is nice. Melee hits that destroy armor have a 10% chance to create usable makeshift armor for free. This is a nice bonus. If your team plays around armor, most teams don't play around armor and makeshift armor as good as it can be. So, I mean, it's situational. Next up, we have Line 'em Up. Line 'em Up is a situational card. It is a decent card because it provides some good stat bonuses. The problem is it's hard to justify ever taking this. Cold Brew Coffee gives you 3 bonuses to the 3 most important categories. Line 'em Up gives you 1. It gives you 10% bullet range. Doesn't matter. It gives you 15% recoil control. Nice, but not worth picking the card up for. 25% bullet penetration. Now that's good for shotguns, snipers, LMGs. That's nice. That's handy. Not worth picking up on its own. And 25% aim speed, which is nice. Now, the aim speed and the bullet penetration go hand in hand, making it decent. The recoil control is nice, and the range doesn't fucking matter. However, hard time justifying this card taking up a slot for those bonuses. Those bonuses are not significant enough most of the time. Overwatch. Overwatch is situational. It's good in sniper builds, and that is it. Kills that are... Any kill you score that is 15 meters away or more gives teammates within 15 meters of the target 5 temporary health. In theory, this works best when you're standing in the back, your teammates are in the front, and you're just racking up temporary health for your team. In practice, the downside to this is that because you can't benefit off of it, you would assume this makes sniper medics good. Most medics don't play with snipers. And if it was regular healing or trauma healing, that would be one thing. It's temporary health. Temporary health is pretty much worthless. And for that reason, it's not good. If it was regular health or if it was regular trauma, that would make it viable. That would make it a competitor in every build. For temporary health, it's just situational. It's only good if you're playing with snipers. Now that we have Face Your Fears, and this is a terrible card. It's terrible. It's 1 temporary health, which you get anytime you kill a Ridden that's right in your face. It's good for melee characters, right? Wrong, because temporary health depletes at 1 per second. Which means you are losing that health pretty much as soon as you apply it. So, it's trash. Fresh Bandage is a good card. Now, unfortunately, it's a card that I find myself substituting out of a lot of builds because the impact of the card wanes the higher difficulty you go. But what it does is at the start of each level, you will recover 15 trauma, and then you recover any missing health in between what you had and your new trauma total. Now, this is a good card to run. The downside is this only works if you're full health. And it's not mentioned. If you're full health, but you have trauma damage, so let's say your maximum health is 110, but you're at 90 health, but you're full at 90 health, this will recover 15. It'll put you at 105, and you'll be at the 105. It's not going to work if you are missing health to begin with. That does kind of hold it back on higher difficulties and why it gets subbed out a lot. But it's a good card to run, especially with bots that are healing you. So for solo players and speedrunners, it's pretty good. In addition to that, just the fact that it recovers trauma damage is nice. It can incentivize you to waste a healing item to get to full health before the end of the level, so it activates. But it's one of those cards you're going to fight for in every build to throw it in. All right, we can start to sum these up a little bit more quickly. These are a lot easier for me to sum up. First up, we have defensive maneuver, which is terrible. This is when you take a single hit for 15 or more damage. You get 25% damage resistance for 3 seconds. Now, this is a good effect to have. 25% damage resistance is a lot, even though 3 seconds doesn't sound like it's long. The problem is it's the activation. Again, 15 damage in a single hit is hard to do on lower difficulties. On higher difficulties, you're not tanking multiple hits. Now, obviously, the goal is, you tank a hit, the damage resistance kicked in, so you're not taking another 15 damage. But that also is what holds it back. I kind of wish this was actually damage scaling, where if it was you took 15% of your health in a single hit, because then you could use this at lower health. Then it would be great. Other than that, it's kind of terrible. Broadside. This is a very good card if you are specifically going for weak spot kills or shotgun or headshots. Basically, precision kills have a 20% chance to cause the Ridden to explode, dealing 15 damage to any other Ridden within 4 meters. Basically, if you are headshotting common Ridden in a group, you can basically get corpse explosion from any other RPG. It's nice to have. Regular builds are gonna have a hard time justifying it. Sniper and precision builds, yeah, they can have some fun with this. Now, it doesn't work off of fire damage, so some builds like that are gonna suffer. It doesn't apply most of the time if they're under a status effect like Shredder, so it's not great for those, but yeah, it's just a generally nice card to have. Next up is 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and this is one of the main reasons why I say that gun builds have 2 builds. This is situational. Your gun build has to determine if it's running 2 primaries or a primary and a secondary because of this one card right here. Now, the minus 25% swap speed is pretty heavy. You have to run something to remove that penalty back off of it, because if you don't, you are going to feel the effects of it, particularly if you're running a slow swap speed gun, like an LMG or a sniper, which are the 2 main reasons why you would run this card. This card pretty much only works if you're afraid of your weapon. If you're a sniper and you don't want to run a common secondary, you don't want to run the Tech 9, you don't want to run the Belugian, and you don't want to run a pistol. You want something that's more versatile and impactful, like an AR or an SMG, you run this. If you're running an LMG and you want something that isn't as ammo consuming, you run this. If you want a shotgun with more range, you run this. The downside is it worth justifying a mandatory second card to run, which is admin reload? Now, you should be running admin reload anyways, but that's a topic for the next video. This card, though, is not mandatory. Sidearms in this game are pretty freaking good. Obviously, melee characters are not running this. Bow characters are not running this. So you have to make the justification of whether or not you need the second primary. Most of the time, I find myself not needing it. But if my character starts with a shitty secondary, mom, then I'm definitely gonna slap this on most of the time. Buckshot Bruiser. This is a terrible card. So what this does is when you use a shotgun, which already restricts your weapon choices, you gain 0.25 temporary health for each pellet that hits. Now, shotguns fire multiple pellets, and it's very easy to hit those multiple pellets. So it's very easy to get a few temporary health points. The downside is that the most you're gonna get realistically, if all of your pellets are hitting, is like 2 temporary health. And that is gone by the time you fire your next shot. So, not worth it. It's kind of trash. Offensive Scavenger. This is incredibly niche. I'm going to say it's bad. It works on Hoffman and Super Grenade builds in which you want extra grenades. I mean, it's nice, but I don't really think it's mandatory even on pack mule builds. I think it's pretty bad. There are more impactful things to be scouting for than grenades and Molotovs. So you can pretty much pick up any offensive accessory, throw it, and get value out of it. Next up is Second Chance. Second Chance is, again, this is a good card that's worth fighting for in most of your builds, but you're going to end up finding yourself taking it out most of the time. 15 extra health is okay. The extra life is what's important, because some of the best cards in the game are in-cap cards, where your team or you gets incapacitated, you get the bonus off of the effects, and it helps push through that tough fight. Second Chance means you get the extra life. You can go down an extra time. The extra 15 health is nice. The 25% bleed out resistance is also nice, so you can stay in the bleed out state longer for your team to get you back up. It's a generally useful card. You're just going to have to fight for it. So, next up we have Chemical Courage. This is a situational card. It requires you to use pain meds. You can use them on yourself. You can use them on others. It's fine. Doesn't matter. It limits your support option, but there's only 3 support options anyway, so you're fine. You know, if you're playing around pain meds, it's nice. The downside is that pain meds are arguably the worst of the 3 healing options. It just gives you 25% flat damage for 60 seconds. So if you're trying to go for a super soldier build that pretty much always is using pain meds to keep this up, the temporary health is nice alongside this, so you stay healthy longer and you deal a ton of damage. The downside is just temporary health decays so quickly, and temporary health is not something you are playing around a lot. This also goes hand in hand with Numb. This is pretty shit. 10% damage resistance while you have temporary health. If this card was more of a significant damage resistance bonus, I could say it's a situational card. Literally, Mom is the only character that gets value out of it, and that's if she's building heavy into temporary health. Outside that literal one exception, it's terrible. You're not going to use it. If the damage resistance was higher, it'd be fine. Power Strike. This is a very niche card. It's fun to play with, but it's terrible. Every 3 seconds you are not bashing, you get 10 bash damage. Oh no, the numbers on that are different. 3 seconds. So after 30 seconds of not bashing, you get 100 damage. 100 bonus damage on your bash. But all your charges go away. That's fine. But generally, you're going to be rapidly bashing when you get jumped anyways, until the horde in front of you is cleared out, or your gun is reloaded, and then you go to firing. Like, I guess this lets you have, like, a super punch against a mutation. But, not worth it. Sadist is an interesting card. Now, I've shit on temporary health. However, Sadist is interesting. The way this works is that whenever a teammate within 15 meters of you takes 5 or more damage from a single hit, you get 20% of the damage as temporary health, and this can be triggered once a second. This means that any teammate that is taking a minimum of 5 damage a hit is giving you 1 temporary health per hit. That is actually pretty decent on higher difficulties. Or if you're a brawler, if you're playing with a brawler who's just waiting and taking damage. The downside is it's temporary health, and that's what makes it situational. If it was health or trauma, it would be pretty good. And that's where one of the next cards that I will talk about, which is Bravado. This card is just fantastic. Any teammate within 15 meters that takes trauma damage heals 15% of that amount back as trauma health. This basically just lets you recoup some of your trauma just by being near somebody. And it is awesome. And it is worth fighting for in every deck if you can. If you can't, you can't, but it's worth it most of the time. This is mandatory on supports. This is mandatory on melees. Other than that, great card. We have Bodyguard. Bodyguard sucks. Whenever a teammate within 5 meters of you is attacked, you take 75% of the damage instead of them. So they're still taking 25% damage. But you're taking some off. Now, the idea is obviously to put this on a tank build. Now, one problem is that this can only trigger every 5 seconds. Problem number 2 is that if you're already getting hit and then your teammate just gets fucking wailed on by like a bruiser while you're nearby, oh yeah, oh no, you can die very quickly with this. This card is terrible. You never want to run this. Then we have Well Rested. Well Rested is actually a good card. And the reason why it's a good card is for one reason. It applies overheal. This means that 20% of the healing you would normally lose because you're already at full health is then applied as temporary health. Now this is good because it means additional healing isn't wasted. You will get value out of healing somebody that's, you know, like mid to high health. If you like want to use a healing item because there's abundance of them laying around, this gives you more value. Now, one of the few cards that I don't have is 20% is Fit as a Fiddle. This is 20% team bolstered health and 5 total team health. Team bolstered health is essentially 20% health with a little bit of trauma resistance. It's okay. It has the same exact qualification as Well Fed. It's a nice card to run, but you're going to find yourself having a hard time using it. Now, all of the gadgets, like I said, are trash because they take up a slot. So, all of these cards are trash. You're never going to use them. We're going to rate them based off of how good they are amongst themselves. The best one is Drone Spotter. It takes up your quick slot, which is the least impactful. It costs 20 sniper ammo, which is the least impactful. And it provides a good bonus. Every 7 seconds, you will mark nearby mutations. That's good. That gives you Carly, Casey, whatever the fuck her name is, bonus passively. And it gives you a 20% chance to negate damage while active. All damage. Problem, it's fragile. Which means it breaks as soon as you take damage. Friendly fire damage, fall damage, environmental damage, attack damage. Yeah. Kinda sucks. And it's the best of the 3. The next best is the Ether Bomb. This takes away your support slot, which automatically means it's garbage. It costs 50 assault rifle ammo, which, again, that is expensive. What does it do? It emits a cloud that will attract Ridden to you for 7 seconds. And it slows your movement speed by 50%, which is designed to make you stay and take it. Now, melee characters could get value out of this if it didn't take up your support slot. Yeah, this is just pretty much terrible. It's a lure, and that's about it. Then the next one, which is also terrible, is the ultrasonic wound therapy. Supports are often tempted to run this, but it's just not worth it. It takes away your offensive slot. It costs 60 pistol and SMG ammo. And what it does is it makes it so that you heal your teammates for 6 health over 7 seconds. It doesn't even give you 1 health per second. The duration is so long, and the healing is so small. You could literally get more value out of this by running Vanguard and bashing a full stamina bar of enemies to death. I want you to know that. That is how bad this card is. That Vanguard and the combat knife does more healing than this card does. Without costing ammo and without taking away your offensive slot. So yeah, terrible. Another terrible card that you never want to run is Out with a Bang. In theory, this card is great. Whenever a teammate gets incapacitated or dies, they drop an active pipe bomb, so you can take some of them ridden with you. The downside is if you have a teammate that comes over to revive you, they've now eaten friendly fire damage to the face. I have seen chain reactions on veteran difficulty of one person runs out with a bang, and it kills the entire team. Because one person goes down, out with a bang procs, the second person is right there. Whether they are trying to get away, or whether they're trying to revive, the pipe bomb goes off, and now they're down. So now another pipe bomb goes off. Another teammate stupidly comes over to revive them, they get, or the first guy, and they get blown up by the pipe bomb, so now they drop a pipe bomb, and the last dude standing now has to run away, fight off the horde by themselves, while waiting for your pipe bombs to stop blowing up, so that they can come over and do something. It's a terrible card. Don't run it. You want cards that keep you from going down, or that help you win fights when you've gone down, not kill your teammates. Empowered Assault is kind of that niche situational card. Whenever you kill a mutation, the next time you deal damage to a mutation, you are guaranteed to stumble them. This is good. This works on guns as well as melee. It also increases team stumble damage. It's just simply not worth justifying, because it really only affects tall boys, bruisers, crushers. It doesn't affect the other ones, because the other ones die so quickly. Like bloaters, reekers, stalkers, hawkers, they die so quickly, it doesn't matter. And remember, stumble doesn't work on bosses. So yeah, it's just not, it's not worth the slot, but if you can work it into some builds. Cleansing Fire is a very niche effect. It gives you 40% fire resistance. It makes it to where fire now removes negative status effects other than damage over time from fire. And you gain 5% stacking damage resistance for every second you are on fire, up to a maximum of 5 stacks, and these stacks last for 15 seconds. So you can get 25% damage resistance for being on fire. One problem, you're not immune to fire damage. You still take fire damage. So because of that, it's hard to justify. It's actually kind of fun to run this in a damage build, because you can kind of just throw a Molotov at your own feet to proc the effect, and now you have good damage resistance, and you can remove debuffs. The downside is you do have to eat the damage over time from the fire. So, but that covers all of the green cards. I have one more video to do, which will be on the yellow cards, and then we can start explaining some of the builds that we have set up. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you all next time.